Ladies and gentlemen, we live in an age of masks and mirrors, where people shape themselves in the image of likes, and truth is sacrificed on the altar of being liked. We are told to care what they think, to care how we look, to care how they feel about us. But I tell you this night, a holy mystery, you must learn to act like you don't care. Wait, am I saying to stop loving? No, I am saying this, to love rightly, you must die to the fear of man. You must learn to walk through the fire and not flinch, to be spit upon, misunderstood, and misjudged, and still not bend the knee. For Messiah stood before the rulers of this world. Pilate questioned him. The mob accused him, but he answered not a word. Why? Because he didn't care. No, because he cared too much about the will of the Father to be ensnared by the opinion of men. This generation is addicted to applause. They crave validation like the desert craves rain, but the more you crave it, the more you are owned by it, and so I tell you, learn to act like you don't care. Let the world misunderstand you, let them mock, let them mislabel. Let them twist your words and cancel your name. You are not called to be popular. You are called to be holy. You see, the enemy doesn't fear your good intentions. He fears your detachment, because when you stop reacting, when you stop caring about the whispers of men, you become dangerous. The lion doesn't flinch when a jackal howls. The eagle doesn't look down when the crows circle. The prophet doesn't bow to Baal because he's outnumbered. You must learn the art of holy indifference, not coldness, but consecration. Not apathy, but authority, for when you act like you don't care, you declare, my identity is not in this world. My peace is not in your hands. My purpose is not for sale. And in that moment the chains fall. The fear flees, and the fire of heaven is free to burn in you, unquenched and undistracted. So rise up, child of God, put on the armor of unbending peace. Learn the stillness of the lamb and the defiance of the lion. Live as if you don't care, because your care belongs to a higher realm, and the world will not understand you, but it will remember you. In this world we walk through, the thirst for approval is like a hidden river running beneath everything. Quiet, persistent, and deceptive. From the moment we first drew breath, we've been trained almost subconsciously to care about what others think. The child seeks praise from the parent. The student seeks favor from the teacher. The adult craves recognition from the crowd. It becomes a cycle, and before we even realize it, we're building lives based on applause rather than purpose. We dress a certain way, speak in certain tones, post curated moments of joy and success, not always because they're real, but because we've been conditioned to need the reaction. That's the trap. The illusion of approval becomes a false god. It's subtle, but it enslaves. When you live for approval, you are no longer free. Your joy is now tied to someone else's opinion. Your peace becomes fragile, easily broken by silence, by criticism, by comparison. You walk into a room and gauge your worth by the glances you receive. You share your heart but wait in fear to see if it's accepted. Even your convictions, once strong, can begin to erode if they threaten your place in the social order. That's not freedom, that's bondage, and it's one of the enemy's most clever chains. The world tells you that to be accepted is to be safe, but in truth, to be addicted to acceptance is to live at the mercy of a changing wind. Today they cheer you, tomorrow they crucify you. It happened to the prophets. It happened to the Messiah himself. One day the crowd laid down palm branches. Days later they shouted for his blood. If the Son of God could not hold the favor of man, who are we to seek it? And if he did not chase after it, why should we? What most don't realize is that the approval they seek from the world is a counterfeit of something deeper, the divine affirmation of God. But here's the paradox. The more you chase the world's approval, the further you drift from God's. The world's applause and God's approval rarely live in the same room. One is fleeting, the other is eternal, but only one will require your soul as payment. So when you live for people's acceptance, you forfeit your prophetic authority. You can no longer speak truth if truth might cost you favor. You become muzzled, powerless, shallow, and eventually forgettable. We see this in Scripture. The mighty men and women of God were never the ones chasing public affirmation. In fact, they were often rejected, despised, persecuted, and exiled, but they were free. Elijah stood alone on Mount Carmel, not asking if the people agreed with him, but declaring what God had spoken. Jeremiah wept because no one would listen, yet he did not rewrite the message to win hearts. Esther risked her life before a king who held her future in his hands, and still she stepped forward not for applause but for obedience. This is the beginning of spiritual maturity, when you no longer need to be understood, when your spirit no longer bends to every criticism, when your identity is no longer fragile, when your sense of worth doesn't swing with public opinion. That's where power begins. That's where authority begins. That's where peace begins. It is not arrogance to detach yourself from the opinions of the world. It is humility before God, because when you live for His smile, the frowns of men lose their power. When you anchor your worth in what the Father has spoken over you, no comment, no rejection, no silence can shake it. You're not cold, you're consecrated, you're not careless, you're rooted. You don't stop caring about people. You just stop letting their opinions define your value. To learn to act like you don't care is not a move toward apathy, it's a move toward divine alignment. It means walking into every room knowing you are already accepted in the courts of heaven. It means speaking with boldness, even when silence would be safer. It means living with joy, even when no one applauds. It is the kind of living that upends the world, because once you no longer need their approval, you're finally free to live for a higher purpose. And that, ironically, is when the world takes notice, because the person who walks without needing approval walks in a power the world cannot understand. There is a power that comes not from speaking, not from defending yourself, not from proving your point, but from silence. A holy stillness, a sacred calm, a divine posture that says, I don't need to react because I know who I am. That's what I call the armor of holy indifference. It's not indifference born of bitterness or arrogance or apathy. No, it's the indifference of the one who is secure, the one who is rooted in something greater than perception, accusation, or applause, the one who, like Messiah before Pilate, knows the truth and does not need to argue it. The scriptures tell us that when Yeshua stood before Pilate, accused, mocked, lied about, he opened not his mouth. Think about that. He could have spoken a word and unraveled their arguments. He could have called down legions of angels. He could have exposed every hidden lie in that courtroom. And yet he stood in silence, unshaken, still. It was not weakness. It was not surrender. It was power. It was control. It was divine indifference to the noise of men and absolute devotion to the voice of the Father. That is the armor we must learn to wear. You see, in the days we live in, everyone is reacting. Social media has turned us into slaves of impulse. We are provoked by opinions, baited by controversy, addicted to outrage. People get offended by shadows and manipulated by headlines. The enemy has found a perfect strategy to keep the children of God in a constant state of distraction and emotional exhaustion. Why? Because a distracted heart cannot discern. An offended spirit cannot hear clearly, and a person who reacts to every insult cannot carry the weight of heavenly authority. But the one who has learned holy indifference is different. They don't flinch. They don't panic. They don't defend themselves every time their name is dragged through the mud. Why? Because they've already surrendered their reputation to God, and what is given to God is no longer vulnerable to man. The accusations come, but the spirit remains calm. The criticisms rise, but the soul is at rest. This is not spiritual passivity. It is spiritual discipline, the fruit of maturity, the strength of someone who knows they do not answer to man, but to the throne of heaven. This armor of holy indifference doesn't make you numb. It makes you focused. You no longer waste energy trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer lose sleep over slander that has no eternal weight. You no longer break your rhythm every time someone throws a stone. Instead, like Nehemiah rebuilding the wall, you stay on the wall, you keep working, you keep building, and when the voices call you down, you simply answer, I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. The enemy wants you reactive because a reactive person is vulnerable. A reactive person is easily controlled, but the one who wears holy indifference is ungovernable by the world. You can't shame them because they've already died to their ego. You can't manipulate them with praise because they don't need your approval. You can't threaten them because they've already surrendered everything. That's power, quiet, immovable, holy power, and it doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from intimacy, from being so hidden in God that the world no longer has access to your emotions, from spending time in the secret place until the noise of the world fades, until you no longer feel the need to prove anything, until your soul has been trained to be still in the storm. This is the posture of the prophet, the stance of the saint, the quiet authority of the one who walks with God. So if they speak against you, be still. If they mock you, be still. If they exalt you, be still. If they ignore you, be still. Let your vindication come from heaven. Let your defense be in the nail. Guard hands of the one who knows the truth. When you walk in holy indifference, you walk in heaven's confidence. And that, my friend, is a force no man can withstand. There's a principle in the realm of spiritual warfare that many overlook, yet it is one of the most critical keys to walking in sustained victory. What you feed grows, what you starve dies. The enemy, the adversary of your soul, doesn't need to destroy you with brute force. He only needs to keep you reacting. He knows that if he can get your attention, he can gain a measure of control. And so, he doesn't always come at you with storms and catastrophes. Sometimes he just whispers. Sometimes he simply nudges someone to say the right wrong thing just to provoke you. And the moment you take the bait, the moment you respond emotionally, defensively, anxiously, that's the moment you hand over your peace. You see, the enemy feeds on your attention, not because he grows stronger in some metaphysical sense, but because when you give him your focus, you shift your alignment. Instead of being centered in the spirit, grounded in truth, you begin living in reaction to darkness. And the moment you start reacting to the enemy, you're no longer being led by the Spirit. You're being led by fear, pride, insecurity, or offense. You're no longer operating from your position in Christ. You're functioning as a vulnerable target. That's the strategy of distraction. The battle isn't always about destruction. It's often about disruption. The devil doesn't need to get you to sin wildly to neutralize you. All he has to do is keep you offended, restless, constantly trying to manage your image, defend your name, prove your point, or chase applause. If he can keep your soul agitated, then he's already disarmed you. You cannot carry revelation when your heart is caught up in retaliation. You cannot walk in authority if your peace can be stolen by a comment, a rumor, a rejection, and so the Lord calls you to a deeper discipline, not just of action, but of attention. You must guard your focus like a soldier guards a gate. You must become spiritually selective about what gets your reaction. Not everything deserves an answer. Not every insult needs a response. Not every false accusation needs a defense. Why? Because every time you respond out of impulse, you're feeding a system of control. You're acknowledging the enemy's invitation to descend into chaos. Think of it this way: the enemy is like a puppeteer. He dangles emotional strings: fear, comparison, criticism, gossip, rejection. And if you respond every time one is pulled, you become a marionette instead of a messenger. But when you refuse to be pulled, when you choose stillness, silence, prayer, or simple non-response, you sever those strings. You step off the stage of drama and into the sanctuary of peace. Messiah himself modeled this perfectly. When the religious leaders tried to trap him in words, he often responded with questions or with silence. When they tried to stir him into anger, he remained calm. When the devil tempted him in the wilderness, he didn't debate. He declared truth, and then he dismissed the accuser. That's how you break the cycle. You refuse to engage the darkness on its terms. You stop playing the enemy's game, and that takes strength. It takes maturity. It takes knowing who you are and whose you are. When you stop reacting, you reclaim your power. Because the enemy thrives in emotional chaos, but he is helpless against peace. Peace is not passive, it is a weapon. It's not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of divine order. And when you remain in peace, you become spiritually untouchable. You frustrate the plans of hell. You confuse the spirits that were sent to provoke you. You create a space where God can speak and move, unhindered by emotional interference. So you must learn to starve the enemy. Starve him of your panic, starve him of your fear, starve him of your need to be validated, starve him of your compulsive reactions, starve him of your anxious explanations, and as you do, watch his influence wither. Watch your authority rise. Watch heaven fill the space that used to be occupied by drama and noise. You were never meant to live your life reacting to shadows. You are called to move in light, so guard your peace. Keep your eyes on the King. Let the storms rage, let the critics shout, let the whispers fly, but don't give them your attention, because when your focus remains on the throne, the enemy loses his power to touch you. To truly love, you must first be free, and to be free, you must learn detachment, not from people, but from the need to be defined by them. This is the paradox of spiritual maturity, that real care often looks like detachment. Not because you have ceased to love, but because you've refused to love in a way that entangles, enslaves, or compromises your soul. True love does not cling, it releases. It does not beg, it blesses. It does not bend truth to be accepted. It stands firm, even when misunderstood. Many mistake emotional intensity for love. They think that to care deeply is to worry constantly, to become enmeshed, to always be available, to always say yes. But what they call love is often fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being rejected, fear of being seen as uncaring. And so their love becomes control in disguise. It becomes bondage dressed as concern. That's not love, that's need, that's insecurity. And it creates unhealthy attachments that drain the soul and distort the voice of God. But when your heart is rooted in the Father, something shifts. You begin to see people through his eyes, not through the lens of your need, your fear, or your wounds. You can love them without needing to be loved back. You can serve without seeking reward. You can speak truth even when it hurts, because you're not afraid of losing approval. That is detachment, and it is sacred. Not the cold kind that withdraws, but the holy kind that frees. Look at Yeshua. He loved with absolute perfection. He healed, he wept, he taught, he touched the outcasts, and yet he was not ruled by people's responses. He didn't tailor his message to fit the crowd. He didn't chase those who walked away. He let the rich young ruler go. He let Judas leave the table. He even asked Peter, "Do you also want to go?" That is not indifference. It's divine detachment. It's a love that honors free will and trusts the sovereignty of the Father. This kind of love is rare. It's misunderstood because it doesn't always look emotional. It's not always dramatic. It's not driven by guilt or fear or the need to fix everything. It's quiet, steady, powerful. It doesn't panic when others walk through storms. It stands still and intercedes. It doesn't collapse when people disappoint. It forgives and keeps moving. It doesn't get entangled in every crisis. It discerns what is yours to carry and what must be laid at the feet of God. To reach this place, you must die to codependence. You must die to the false identity that is built on being needed, being praised, being right, or being liked. Because until you die to those things, your love will always have strings. You will always love to get something in return, even if it's just the feeling of being valuable. But when your value is settled in heaven, you can love with open hands and open heart. You are no longer afraid of rejection because your identity isn't at risk. You're no longer crushed by failure because you've entrusted outcomes to God. This freedom also allows you to speak hard truths. Many avoid confrontation because they fear disconnection. but sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to say what others refuse to hear. Not in anger, but in clarity, not to control, but to call them higher. The world needs more people who love enough to say, "This is not right," who love enough to say, "I will pray for you, but I will not compromise truth to keep your comfort." That kind of love requires strength. And strength requires detachment. You must come to a place where you can bless those who leave, where you can release what you cannot change, where you can pray without trying to control the outcome, where you can love without losing yourself. That is the posture of Christ-like maturity. That is the path of real peace. So if you've been called heartless for setting boundaries, take heart. If you've been accused of being distant because you no longer enable dysfunction, be encouraged. You are not becoming cold, you are becoming clean. You are not walking away from love. You are walking into a love that is deeper, wiser, freer, and the world may not understand it, but heaven does, for in the kingdom, detachment is not a lack of care. It is the mark of one who loves purely, with nothing to prove and nothing to fear.